House of David kicks off around 1000 BC in ancient Israel, a time when people were really confused about who to follow, God or their king. Basically, after Moses led them out of Egypt, Israel didn't have a king for about 500 years. But then, facing attacks from other countries, they realized they needed a leader. Enter Prophet Samuel, the main religious powerhouse, who steps up and anoints Saul as their very first king. Saul would handle the politics, while Samuel remained the spiritual compass. Initially, King Saul was a battle-hardened hero, winning war after war. But all that success? It went straight to his head. He and his family started believing they were above religion itself. This ignited a colossal showdown between King Saul and Prophet Samuel. Saul demanded the people's loyalty for his house, but Samuel relentlessly hammered home the truth. It's still about God. Right in the middle of all this, Saul's army faces off against the Amalekites, a truly vile enemy known for their brutal attacks on the Hebrews. God, speaking through Samuel, gave a clear order: wipe them out completely, no mercy, no trophies. Yet, despite a decisive victory, Saul outright defied God's orders. He not only shared the spoils, but kept the Amalekite king, Agag, alive, just to parade him around and humiliate him at a victory party. Saul's inner circle is there, soaking it all in. His wife Ahinoam, his 2 daughters, Merab and Michal, his younger son Eshbal, seemingly carefree, just there to flex, and his first son Jonathan, who's just back from inspecting a village ravaged by giants, creatures thought to be extinct. The sole survivor of that horror? A young boy named Reuben. Just when the celebration is at its peak, Prophet Samuel crashes in with judgment. Because Saul brazenly defied God's command, Samuel announces that God is removing Saul from the throne to make way for a new king. Even though Jonathan is a genuinely good guy and should be next in line, the crown is no longer in Saul's family. Instantly, Saul is engulfed by spiritual torment. The favor of God has clearly abandoned him. Then, for all to see, Samuel takes matters into his own hands, dramatically slaying Agag and finally fulfilling God's precise orders. With that grim task done, Samuel sets out on a journey to find this new, chosen king. And it's around this pivotal moment that we meet David, a young shepherd boy from Bethlehem. He's the illegitimate son of Jesse and his late mother Nitzevet, with a younger sister named Ava. Most people avoid him, and even his own family dismisses him, especially his father Jesse, who, after Nitzevet's death, has unfairly blamed David and kept him in the fields. David, however, yearns for more than just sheep gratin. He believes he's destined for something bigger, just as his mother had told him before she died. When a ferocious lion, believed to be long dead, the very same one that killed his mother, resurfaces and begins attacking their flock, David decides, this ends now. He enters the lion's cave, alone, and emerges victorious. Soon after, David is playing his harp at a local wedding when a royal envoy arrives. The princesses Merab and Michal, alongside Joab, captain of the king's guard, and Eliab, David's older brother. Michal is instantly captivated by David, mesmerized by his singing. Their conversation is cut short though. Joab clearly has eyes for Princess Michal, and Merab can't help but notice the stark difference in how he treats her versus her sister. David only adds to the tension when he flatly refuses and throws an Amalekite knife. Joab offers him into the fire, deeming it a taboo. God commanded the utter destruction of all things Amalekite, after all. The next morning, David won't let up, constantly badgering Eliab to help him get an audience with Joab so he can join the army. He even shows off his impressive slinging skills. To try and prove David isn't ready for war, Eliab takes him to that supposedly empty village, the one destroyed by giants. But it's far from empty. They're ambushed by Philistines, and it quickly becomes clear David is indeed out of his depth. Eliab does most of the fighting, but he's ultimately struck by an arrow. As David carries him home for treatment, Eliab wants to give up, convinced the journey is too long and David too weak to make it, urging him to save himself. But David refuses, stubbornly insisting he is stronger than Eliab believes. David makes it home with Eliab, and thankfully, his brother survives the arrow wound. Back in the palace, King Saul is completely consumed by madness, often sleeping for days at a time. Today, though, he's awake. Abner, the king's cousin and general, believes Jonathan should finally take the throne. But Saul, in a display of his lingering power, warns his son that he is still king. He then orders his men to follow Samuel and bring back whoever the prophet anoints. Jonathan is terrified of God's wrath, unsure how to act. He desperately prays to God, who has always been with them, not to forsake them now. He even sacrifices a special armband, a gift from his late wife, asking God to show him his purpose. Just then, screams echo through the palace. Saul, in a fit of madness, is trying to hack his own wife to death with a sword. His madness spirals further after he even kills a child servant. Despite God's clear visions telling him to relinquish the throne, Saul defiantly refuses. His wife, in desperation, turns from God to forbidden mediums, those banished during Saul's saner days. The medium performs her rites, and they assume Saul is now mentally stable. As a show of power, he is ushered into the throne room, meant to reassure the people their king is perfectly fine, when in reality, he's anything but. After the Israelites' surprising victory against the Amalekites, other nations, particularly King Achish, are seriously worried about Saul's army. Achish gathers the 5 kings of the Philistines, urging them to unite and attack Israel. But the other Philistine lords aren't convinced. They believe Achish is driven by a blind desire to avenge his father, who Saul killed. With no luck swaying the lords, Achish decides on a more desperate measure. He heads to that destroyed village to seek out the Anakim and recruit the giants for help. This is when they ambushed Eliab and David. Achish finally meets these towering figures, presented to him by their formidable mother Oprah, and is formally introduced to the most fearsome of them all, Goliath. Prophet Samuel finally arrives at Jesse's house. Jesse himself, scorned by society for his connection to David's Canaanite mother, tries to present all his other sons to Samuel, conveniently leaving David out. But upon inspecting the men, Samuel immediately senses the true king is missing, and chastises Jesse for his disobedience. Ava quickly fetches David. As Samuel touches him, he instantly knows, this is the anointed one. David is anointed, and Samuel marvels at the Lord's ironic humor. David's family is shunned. David himself is overlooked as weak, yet he is the chosen king. His entire family is left dumbfounded when Samuel reveals the true purpose of David's anointing, to be the next king of Israel. Knowing the incredible danger of discovery, Samuel has to leave immediately. If word got out about David's anointing, both their lives would be forfeit. He impresses upon David that his time will come, but for now, the secret must be kept. However, later that very day, Joab arrives with a summon for David. The family, along with us, the viewers, naturally assumes Saul already knows. After all, Abner had sent a spy to follow Samuel, and that spy had even tortured Samuel's apprentice Silas for information before brutally killing him. The tension is unbearable. But upon reaching the palace, with Eliab insisting on accompanying his brother, a surprising truth is revealed. David isn't there for a royal interrogation, but to play his harp for the king. It turns out Michal, mesmerized by David's music at the wedding, had requested him to come and calm her father's worsening madness. Both brothers heave a massive sigh of relief. Eliab, still wary, warns David never to leave his assigned room. The palace is a dangerous place. Yet David, overwhelmed with excitement at being in the city for the first time in years after being stuck in the fields, can't resist wandering. He discovers the scriptorium, a room usually occupied only by Michal and strictly barred to outsiders. To his surprise, Michal welcomes him. She quickly realizes David doesn't know how to read, and one night, she begins to teach him. This innocent, forbidden moment coincides with a chilling development. Abner gets word from his spy that Samuel visited the tribe of Judah. Without hesitation, he instructs Joab and Eliab to find out more. Eliab rushes back to David's room, the place he told him never to leave, only to find it empty. David is in the scriptorium, playing love with Michal. Another brewing storm hits the palace when Jair, the elder of the tribe of Dan, arrives in court. He publicly accuses Eshbaal of defiling his only daughter and demands that Eshbaal marry her. Eshbaal, ever the arrogant one, just taunts the man, pushing Jair to invoke the harsh law of Moses. If Eshbaal doesn't marry her, he's to be stoned to death. The house of Saul absolutely cannot afford to lose allies right now. To save her son's life, Ahinoam desperately invokes another provision of the law of Moses concerning cities of refuge. She banishes Eshbaal to Endor, a desolate place for outcasts and criminals, explaining that this will spare blood from both houses. Eshbaal is stunned. He clearly expected this to be just another one of his usual screw-ups, quickly swept under the rug by his parents. Not this time. However, on his journey to Endor, his caravan is ambushed by Achish's men. All his guards are slaughtered, but Eshbaal himself is spared. Desperate to pinpoint which exact family Samuel visited, Abner meets with Adriel, the powerful leader of the biggest tribe in Israel, the tribe of Judah. But Adriel isn't about to give up information for free. Abner reports back to Ahinoam, who now relies heavily on the medium to manage the king's madness. The medium suggests a strategic union. A marriage with Adriel's family will secure his loyalty to the house of Saul. The chosen bride, Michal, she's utterly heartbroken, having fallen deeply for David, a feeling he wholeheartedly reciprocates. Joab, too, is vehemently against this union, but it's the king's command. However, during the elaborate celebration, King Saul, observing his daughters, notices something. While Michal is obedient and his perfect favorite, his first daughter Merab is mostly overlooked, stubborn and unpredictable. Merab, it turns out, is smitten with one of Adriel's middle sons, Jordan, whom she'd met earlier at the wedding where David played. He's also overlooked, not even considered a contender for Michal's hand. Seeing the quiet connection between Merab and Jordan, and Michal's obvious sadness, Saul makes a snap decision. He will wed Merab and Jordan instead. Adriel surprisingly agrees. Everything seems to be going smoothly, until Adriel is gifted the ancient Genesis scroll, containing Jacob's blessing for Judah. As he begins to read, Saul's madness erupts in full, terrifying force. Agag, haunting his mind, taunts him that Adriel is trying to seize his throne. David's songs have often calmed the king, but this time, the madness is too overwhelming. Saul furiously calls off the marriage. When Ahinoam tries to intervene, urging him to rest, Saul violently chokes her, tearing her precious necklace in the process. Screaming, he banishes Adriel, and in a symbolic act of ultimate disdain, tears down the flag of Judah. They have definitively lost Adriel as an ally. Merab, having genuinely found a connection with Jordan, is deeply hurt by this cruel turn of events. David, happily heading to his quarters after Michal's cancelled marriage, is ambushed by a furious Joab. Joab threatens to throw him off the high palace building if he doesn't stay away from Michal. But in a surprising twist, David calmly tells him to do it. Taken aback, Joab lets him go. Unable to sleep that night, David wanders the palace. He encounters the king, who, in a rare moment of lucidity, is consumed by guilt for the shame and sadness he's brought upon his family. David, with surprising empathy, tells him they will eventually heal. Saul, perhaps seeing something noble in David, offers him to sit on his throne. David respectfully declines. Only after Saul leaves does David quietly sit upon the throne, a silent moment of destiny. Ahinoam, who has consistently relied on traditional herbs and safe measures to manage the king, is now desperate. The medium suggests a drastic step, dark magic to heal the king. Ahinoam has always been against such forbidden practices, but now she believes it's their only option. Since magic is outlawed in Israel, the medium advises Ahinoam to use the king's ring to change the law while he is deep in his maddened sleep. Michal saw it, David sitting on the throne, and after her mother had warned her that David was a banished bastard from the hills, and how lowly men often manipulate princesses for power, Michal is now deeply wary of David. When they finally speak, David admits his fear, that people always leave him because of his background, which is why he kept his secret. He questions whether he's going to lose Michal too, offering a desperate alternative. They can leave Gibeah together, find freedom in a simple life, somewhere the king will never find them, but Michal knows better, they would be found. Though she insists she loves him, she believes they can never be together. With this heartbreak, David decides to return home. Jonathan stumbles upon the medium performing black magic and violently scatters everything, declaring that the house must serve only God. He then makes a bold decision, to find Samuel, who no one has been able to locate, but Jonathan suspects he's retreated to Mount Sinai. Upon reaching the sacred mountain, Jonathan receives a vision, he and his father dying on a battlefield. When he comes to, he's attacked by Samuel, who, despite his age, proves surprisingly formidable. Realizing it's Jonathan, Samuel releases him. Jonathan questions why this curse continues to plague his father. Samuel explains it's because Saul is unwilling to release what is no longer his, effectively becoming a god unto himself, in blatant violation of the first commandment. Samuel insists he cannot heal Saul, despite his own fervent pleas, nor can he definitively say whether Jonathan's grim visions are certain or not. After Jonathan solemnly promises his allegiance to God above all else, Samuel finally shares that he has indeed anointed a new king, whose reign will truly know no end. As Jonathan departs, Samuel urges him to pass through the valley and not the way he came. Something dark is stirring. In the days of the old rebellion, when the angels of heaven sought the eternal throne, they rose in defiance and were defeated, cast out of heaven to earth. It's debated whether these angelic watchers were simply cast out or tasked with guarding mankind. But eventually, a watcher named Shamyaza and his followers were consumed by unnatural desire, took the daughters of men as wives, and spawned the gigantic Nephilim. God responded by punishing these rogue angels, banishing them into eternal darkness, while humanity eventually hunted down and destroyed the Nephilim. Goliath and his brothers are the last of their kind, forced to hide in caves to protect themselves. But now King Achish offers them an opportunity, freedom, and the promise of being treated like gods. This, however, isn't enough for Oprah, the giant's formidable mother. She boldly demands Achish's throne in exchange for the giants fighting for him. Achish flatly refuses. To ensure the giants don't turn on him after his refusal, Achish secretly plots to kill them on their way back home. But Abner's cunning spy, Doeg, who had heard the giant's origin story from Reuben, offers Achish another, more insidious option. While Goliath and his brothers are celebrating, Oprah goes to get more wine and is ambushed by Doeg. He brutally stabs her, explicitly naming the House of Saul and telling her this is a message from them. With her dying breath, Oprah tells Goliath that the House of Saul is responsible and commands him to avenge her. Enraged and grieving, Goliath returns to Achish and immediately swears his allegiance, ready to gather all the Philistine armies for war. Doeg seems to be playing both sides. Following Samuel's advice, Jonathan passes by the valley of Elah and sees a massive Philistine armies assembling, a truly terrifying sight. Racing back to Gibeah, he reports the news to Saul, but scouts have already brought word. It truly looks like his grim vision is about to come through. All of David's brothers have been summoned to fight for the king, but his father, Jesse, still refuses to let David go. This infuriates David, who believes he is meant for more than the fields. His frustration boils over until Samuel returns. The prophet, after sacrificing the best of Jesse's flock as an atonement, insists that Jesse must also make a sacrifice of what he loves most, his son. Samuel warns that if Jesse tries to cling to David, his fingers will break, a physical manifestation of his defiance of God's will. Angry and confused by his father's refusal, David storms off into the fields. There, he has a powerful dream. He sees a commander at a river, who instructs him to pick a pebble from the water, but when he looks down, his hand and the pebble are covered in blood. Upon returning home, David finds his father loading a donkey with food. To his utter shock, Jesse is finally letting him go to the battlefield. But before he leaves, Jesse confesses the painful truths he's kept from David. He reveals that his first wife, the mother of his other sons, was a prudent choice of an impeccable bloodline, meant to offset his own tainted blood from his Moabite grandmother Ruth. Whereas Nitzevet, the woman he truly loved, was a Gentile, making their marriage unlawful. Jesse confesses that Nitzevet had frequent, terrifying visions about David, and her final request was for him to be released to fulfill his destiny. But Jesse admits he kept David in the fields, not out of shame, but because David is the last part of Nitzevet that remains. The two finally embrace, with Jesse professing his love and begging for forgiveness before David departs for the battlefield. The preparations for war are underway, and the Philistine armies, numbering a massive 200,000 men, arrive with Goliath. The Israelites are hugely outnumbered, but they have always won their battles with God on their side. However, with Samuel nowhere to be found, the prophet who always blessed them before battle, everyone is filled with apprehension. Just when morale is at its lowest, Adriel, the elder of Judah, arrives with a formidable 25,000 men and publicly pledges his support, a crucial moment after the king's previous breakdown. The Israelites' spirits soar, and they're pumped to go to battle until King Achish changes his strategy. Instead of a direct attack, he opts to break the Israelites' spirit first by sending out his champion, Goliath. The sight of the giant warrior instantly triggers Saul's madness. He has a terrifying madness-induced vision of Goliath holding his own skull, which causes him to fall from his horse and flee to his quarters. For several days, Goliath marches out into the valley, challenging the Israelites to send a champion for a duel that will decide the war. He brutally mocks their God and their army. Hearing the news of Goliath's arrival, Saul's madness, and the Philistines' giant, everyone, including the queen Ahinoam, is giving up hope. But not Michal. She retrieves a scroll and heads for the battlefield, determined to help her father. Not knowing the route, she is joined by her sister Merab, who offers to guide her. It looks like the fate of Israel rests on the most unlikely of heroes. With morale in a freefall, Jonathan takes a desperate gamble. He launches a surprise attack with some mercenaries to try and kill Goliath. But the mercenaries betray him, and Jonathan is captured. Achish, however, shockingly releases him, sending him back with a message for his father. Israel must surrender in 24 hours or everyone, including their families, will be slaughtered. Jonathan, bewildered, questions why the Philistines haven't attacked yet. Achish contrasts his own ancestors, conquerors who crossed the sea, with Jonathan's, who were once slaves who preferred their bondage to the freedom Moses offered. He sneers, concluding that Philistines were made to rule, and Hebrews were made to serve. When Jonathan reminds him that God drowned their Egyptian oppressors in that very same sea, Achish laughs, questioning where Yahweh is now, and mocking Jonathan's fear of using the divine name. It's now painfully obvious that Israel is completely surrounded. A retreating Zebulun tribe is ambushed on their way home, a testament to their isolation. Immediately Michal arrives at Saul's tent. She begins to read from her scroll, powerfully quoting the very words Moses used to rally the Israelites to face the Anakim. Do not be in dread or afraid of them. The Lord your God who goes before you will himself fight for you, just as he did for you in Egypt before your eyes, and in the wilderness, where you have seen how the Lord your God carried you, as a man carries his son, all the way that you went until you came to this place. This stirring recitation resonates deeply in my spirit, and finally breaks through to Saul. He emerges from the darkness and embraces her. Fortunately, David also arrives on the scene, just as Goliath is still mocking God. David is not about to stand by and listen. He offers to fight Goliath, and everyone, even his brother Eliab, thinks he's completely mad. But after speaking with the king, who is now filled with new courage, Saul agrees to let him fight. No one else was going to anyway. He offers David his armor, but as David puts it on, Michal arrives with a final message of encouragement. She pulls out a small strip of parchment, reading her own paraphrase of God's exhortation to Joshua, and tucks it into his armor. Hearing the jeers of worried soldiers, David feels a sting of self-doubt. But Michal reminds him that God uses unlikely vessels and overlooked things because he sees what's inside them, just as she sees the power inside of him, despite her fear. Kissing him, she urges him to kill the giant and come back to her. David quickly realizes he cannot use the king's armor. Instead, he goes to a stream, where he finds a single pebble, just like the one from his prophetic dream. Jonathan appears, questioning how he plans to face the giant. David insists that what matters isn't the size of the giant, but the greatness of God, who will be with him. Realizing who he is, Jonathan offers one last crucial piece of advice. The best time to attack Goliath is right after he throws a spear. As he emerges from the battle line, Goliath mocks and curses him. David charges forward, dodging 2 spears, but is grazed by the third, falling to the ground. Everyone, including Michal, watches in terror, praying and calling for David to rise up. On a nearby hilltop, Samuel appears and offers a sacrifice, blessing the battle. David rises, clutching a bloody stone, the one from his vision. Enraged, Goliath throws one last spear at David for his mother. David dodges it and, in one swift motion, releases a sling stone, striking Goliath directly in the head. For a moment the giant stands frozen, blood running down his face. Then he falls, to the utter shock of everyone, especially King Achish. Rushing forward, David seizes Goliath's sword and, with a final triumphant act, cuts off his head and lifts it in the air. The Israelites, seeing this impossible victory, are filled with zeal and charge against the Philistines, now knowing for sure that God is with them. While this epic duel was taking place, people back home, assuming everyone at the battle was dead, had already given up hope. Ahinoam decides to crown Eshbaal king to unite the northern tribes and rebuild what's left of Israel, not knowing the tides of war have just completely turned.